The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. So begins the Tao Te Ching, translated as the Book of the Way and its power. But here I am going to talk about it because in linguistic terms, human beings are symbolic creatures. I mean, all we have are words and images. Even our nonverbals are symbolic. But the Tao Te Ching begins with acknowledging that the Tao is always just outside our grasp, and all we can do is point to it. You know, there's been a cottage industry of books that have kind of hijacked the word Tao in order to sell. And here are a few. And a few more. And a few more. And three more. I'm going to ask folks to mute their screens. Remember, I said in previous classes that all Chinese religion begins with human beings are by nature good. All Chinese religion begins that way. That Chinese religion lies on a continuum. Confucianism on one end, the yang, and Taoism on the other, the yin. Confucianism emphasizes social responsibility. Taoism, the spontaneous and serendipitous. Confucianism stresses the cultivation of moral behavior in social order. Taoism, the cultivation of the inner psyche and going with the flow. Confucianism, having and doing. Taoism, being. Whoops. The Tao does nothing, yet through it all things are done, the Tao Te Ching says. So ponder that. Ponder how the Tao might look in your life. All beliefs, values, concepts are ultimately relative to the mind and the heart of the person who holds them, Taoists say. Like all dualistic thinking, even good and evil are not ultimately head-on opposites. Remember the yin and the yang moving in and out of each other. What appears to be evil can hold within it a good, and what appears to be good can really be an evil. That's not to say that there aren't such things as good and evil. There are. It's just that they're socially, culturally conditioned and not absolute. Yin and yang. Have you ever had something wonderful happen to you that turned out to be a curse? Or ever had something terrible happen to you that, in the end, even if you never would have chosen it, somehow became, even at great cost, an occasion for growth? Balance is what's important. Life is a mystery. There's a famous Taoist story of a farmer and his son whose only possession was a horse. One day their horse ran away and a neighbor came by and said, "What a terrible thing that your horse ran away." And the man said, "I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. It's just the way life is." Ah. The next day, the farmer was out in the field, and sure enough, his prodigal horse came galloping back to the farm, this time leading a whole herd of wild mustangs. And the neighbor came over and said, "What good fortune, your horse has returned, and with him all the other horses, and now you're a rich man." And the farmer said, "I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. It's just the way life is." So the next day, the farmer's son arose early, for he had spied the horse he coveted, and wanting to break him in, got on him and attempted to ride him. But the horse threw him off, and he broke his leg. And the nosy neighbor came rushing over and said, "What a horrible thing to have happened. Your only son has broken his leg, and now you'll have to do his chores, and on top of your own." And the man said, "I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. It's just the way life is." Well, the next day, sure enough, soldiers came to each house, conscripting able-bodied young men for a battle to come. And they took the neighbor's son, but not the son of the farmer. And the neighbor said, "I may never see my son again, but what good fortune for you, your son was spared." And the farmer replied, "I don't know if it's good, and I don't know if it's bad. It's just the way life is." And the story goes on and on for a number of more events in the farmer's life. And you know how it ends? The farmer says, "I don't know if it's good, and I don't know if it's bad. It's just the way life is." The Tao, to use the Taoist term, is inscrutable. Life is a mystery. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, and yet many images are used to describe its effects. It's compared to a bellows. You see a Chinese bellows up on the upper left. It's empty, but it's able to fan a fire flame. A spring of never-ending water. It's compared to the kind heart of a grandmother. It's compared to a mother's womb, rich, fertile, empty, ready to birth and nurture infinite worlds. We join spokes together in a wheel, the Tao Te Ching says, but it's the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it's the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it's the inner space that makes it livable. Or there was something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It's the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the Tao. Most often, though, the Tao is called the way of water. If you're drowning and flail and thrash about in the water, you sink. But if you understand the life force within water and you grow still and trust it, it will buoy you up and sustain you. Water seeks its own level and therefore is a symbol of humility. And it urges us to trust it. All streams flow to the sea because it's lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. If you want to govern the people, you must place yourself below them. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow them. Water flows down a hillside. On the one hand, it conforms itself to the contours of the ground, but on the other, it finds its own way and makes its own path, creating a stream where before none existed. And over time, its gentle current smooths the rough edges of even the sharpest stone. Taoists say that that's how life works too. From the Tao Te Ching again, nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water, yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. How can you dissolve the hard and inflexible in your relationships, in other people, in your life? Strength in weakness, not weakness, but weakness that is strong. Humility, simplicity. Taoists call this Wu Wei. Actionless action is the literal meaning, but it's ordering your life according to the natural flow of things. Again, it's not weakness, but strength in weakness, not passivity, but actionless action. Or here are some other definitions: active non-action, effortless action, living your life frictionlessly, pure effectiveness. My definition is effortless dynamism or dynamic effortlessness. So how can this be applied practically? Chinese painting keeps human beings small on the canvas, befitting its place in the vastness of the universe and in nature. You have to really look for human beings in Chinese paintings if they're there at all. You see the little hut in the far right. Or they're usually doing very human things, sometimes raking or carrying bundles or just eating, planting crops, climbing hills, making their journeys, surrounded by nature on all sides. Through all of nature, and human beings, remember, are part of nature. They don't stand outside of nature. They're not stewards of nature or dominating nature or controlling nature. They are part of nature. Through all of nature, including human beings, flows the eternal Tao. How does Wu Wei apply to your own personal life? Care about what other people think, and you'll always be their prisoner. Because one believes in oneself, one doesn't try to convince others. Because one is content within oneself, one doesn't need the approval of others. Or what about personal relationships, social policy, governing? When the ruler governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. If you don't trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. When the ruler's work is done, the people say, "Amazing, we did it all by ourselves." And I'll let you read the bottom one. Taoists practice nonviolence because they believe violence and war disrupt the harmony and order of the natural world. Weapons are ominous tools, the Tao Te Ching says. They're abhorred by all creatures. Anyone who follows the Tao shuns them. Such deeds bring on retaliation. Thorn bushes grow where armies have camped. Battles are followed by years of famine. Think about how a Gandhi or Martin Luther King used this understanding of Wu Wei, not as passivity or inaction, but as effortless dynamic action. Creative non-action is non-violence. And by the way, there are a host of others too. I'm thinking of, I've given talks on retreats about Saul Alinsky, for example, the great Chicago activist. Effortless dynamic action, creative non-action. Because the price of violence is too high for both parties. The question for King and Gandhi was, what does it mean to win and what does it mean to lose? Their answer, a very Taoist answer, is that you do not win any confrontation if you leave the other person feeling like a loser, because then you're still left with someone who's your enemy and someone who feels like they've lost. Rather, the question is, how do you actively hold on to the truth, the deeper truth, the deepest truth not your truth or their truth, but the truth about you both, so that you both win. Can you trust the Tao, the way of nature, enough, even at great sacrifice in the long run, not the short run, in the long run? It may even, and often is, beyond your own life, your own earthly existence. In the long run, can you trust it enough to change the other person so they, and maybe even you too, undergo a conversion of the heart? Think about it as psychological or even political judo. You remember in karate, you meet force with force. Every action met with an equal and opposite reaction. That's the Confucian way. But the Taoist way is more like judo. When someone comes at you, and it could be emotionally, socially, politically, religiously, when someone comes at you on a small scale or a large scale, instead of meeting their energy with an equal and opposite energy, you give way, you mirror their move with a yielding move and use their energy to throw them aside. Judo, the art of using your opponent's energy against them, that's the Wu Wei way, the way of water. It's the Tao. The Tao Te Ching puts it like this: when two great forces oppose each other, the victory will go to the one who knows how to yield. Now, listen closely. It's not the one who yields, it's the one who knows how to yield. There are different ways to yield, but if you can yield according to Wu Wei, creative non-action, dynamic effortlessness, the one who knows how to yield, there is strength and there is power in knowing how and when to yield. Psychological, political, personal, even military judo. Now that's pretty radical. Balance, harmony with nature, the earth's rhythm, conforming one's life to the contours of the way of nature, to the way of the universe. Wu Wei as dynamic effortlessness and the power of nonviolence. That's the way of water, and that's the Tao. The Tao Te Ching puts it like this: the gentlest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world. This shows the value of Wu Wei. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water, yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid. The soft overcomes the hard. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. And so I have one more thing to share. And if you'll just allow me to share the screen. Okay. Timothy was talking about looking at songs for next week, and what a neat series. Well, when I used to teach about Taoism, this is the song I used to play. And I'm hoping I can find it. Here it is. My favorite John Denver song.
The earth is is our mother just turning around, with the trees in the forest and roots underground. Our Father above us, whose sigh is the wind, paint us a rainbow without any end. As the river runs freely, the mountain does rise. Let me touch with my fingers and see with my eyes. In the hearts of the children, a pure love still grows, like a bright star in heaven that lights our way home, like the flower that shattered the stone. Sparrows find freedom beholding the sun. In the infinite beauty, we're all joined in one. I reach up before me and look to the sky. Did I hear someone whisper? Did something pass by? As the river runs freely, the mountain does rise. Let me touch with my fingers and see with my eyes. In the hearts of the children, a pure love still grows, like a bright star in heaven that lights our way home, like the flower that shattered the stone. Like a bright star in heaven that lights our way home, like the flower that shattered the stone.
So that's my presentation on Taoism for the day. Where would you like to enter into the conversation?
Michael?
Yes, sir.
Steve Hollingsworth.
Hi, Steve.
I found the phrase love like water, love without attachment, to be a very difficult concept for me. And I think that's all I just found it to be very difficult. I'm not sure exactly. I don't see how that happens, but I don't know that it doesn't. So I don't know if that just means if you love someone, you have to let them go, or, I mean, I'm very dependent on Becky in a lot of ways. And I don't know that I could ever just walk away from that.
We had this conversation. Well, first of all, Steve, people who know you know that you come pretty close to doing that in many ways with kids and grandkids and in causes you give your life to. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that we had this conversation when we talked about Zen, when we talked about detachment. How can you give your whole life to another person or to a cause, to something you believe in, someone you love? That doesn't mean you don't do that, but the detaching is about every moment is a new moment. Every moment is another moment to give. Every moment is another moment to be open to and alive to and aware of all the possibilities. It doesn't mean that we don't grieve when we lose someone or when there's a break. But it means to be so grounded and so centered that even if you're grieving at whatever loss there might be, you grieve for that moment. And then in the next moment, whatever that moment brings, you're open to that. And it might still be grieving, and it might be grieving your entire life after, if you lose someone, or if there's a radical change in your life. So it doesn't mean that we're not attached. It doesn't mean that we don't give our lives or our love to another human being and have those feelings. It's every moment presents us something new, and to be open to whatever feelings, whatever is moving us, whatever passions there are in that moment. And all I would say is, of course, it's difficult because love is difficult. In my Tuesday morning classes, the last 2 weeks, we watched a documentary on Dorothy Day. And she always liked to quote Dostoevsky, right? Love is a harsh and dreadful thing. Love is difficult. But you remember how Scott Peck started The Road Less Traveled. Life is difficult. So I guess I'm rambling, Steve, because I'm commiserating with you.
Well, I appreciate that answer, because I think that the way you described the grieving part, that's just like getting old. I mean, every day it's a new me and it's a new Becky.
Yeah.
And so we can't be lamenting all the time the fact that the other one is going away.
Well, it's a natural thing to do, and yet you miss the present, right? You miss the moment if you're stuck in the past or in an unknown future, right? I mean, and you learn that, and you just witness to it. It's an everyday kind of struggle. Yeah, no, thank you, Steve, for sharing. Who else? Todd, please.
Yeah, hi. Glad to be with you folks for, I guess this is just my second class. I was in person before, and I'm calling you from Michigan, and it's snowy here today. But anyway, David Allen is kind of a guy that I like, that talks, he's a guru about personal productivity and talks about Zen, and mind like water is the phrase that he uses. And you talked about Zen and Confucianism. I mean, is it they're both Eastern religions, but not necessarily directly? I'm trying to figure out the interrelationship between those.
Well, Zen would be more. It's. You've asked a complicated question. Zen is a more of a Japanese version that came from India through China to Japan. But it would, on the continuum of Chinese religion, it would be more associated with Taoism. Again, the Chinese religion is on a continuum. Confucianism on one side, as I showed in that one slide, and Taoism on the other end of the continuum. The wonderful thing about Chinese religion and Eastern faiths, let me say about Chinese religion, I'll just leave it there, is that they don't understand religion like we do in the West. In the West, as I mentioned the first class on yin and yang, you're a Christian, or you're a Jew, or you're a Hindu, or as we describe things, or a Muslim. It'd be hard to be a Christian Muslim or a Jewish Muslim or a Christian Hindu. I mean, you can have appreciation for these, but in the West, religion is an identification. In China, they're not religions as we describe religion. They're more ways of life. And so it would be possible in China, if you're looking to raise your kids, you might use Confucian values, you know, in terms of just keeping order and teaching them moral virtue and all the rest. If you're dealing with dying, you might look to the Buddha. If you're looking to deal in a social relationship, you might follow a Taoist master. And then there are also many, many different tribal customs and rituals and local pieties that you might weave into your family's spiritual life. So religion is a Western concept that we're applying to the so-called religions of China, but it really is about the Tao. And remember the yin and the yang. The wonderful symbol about Chinese religion is that they move within each other and they exist within each other. And so there's a little yin in all of us and there's a little yang in all of us. And we talked last week about the Confucian end of the continuum, and this week we're talking more about the Taoist end of the continuum.
Okay, thank you.
Todd. Yeah, thank you.
It just seems to me, just my parting thought on it is, with such wisdom, it's like, why do we have these problems in the world if with governments? But that's the human condition. And anyway, thank you.
Who else? Thank you, Todd. Hi, Linda. And I see Jan coming up to the screen. Hi, Jan.
I have a question. I guess I always look at things in terms of how to put it practically into my life, and I read a lot of, as you know, AA literature, Al-Anon literature. And this morning, I can't think of a more practical way of how you might put something like this into practice. But in Al-Anon, I read something today about if you're trying to repeatedly voice your opinion with someone and you do it more than once. If you just say something and let the other person speak, then, you know, it is what it is. You just let it go. But if you keep repeating over and over, you're trying to convince that person that what you say is correct. And I thought, I do that a lot, you know, so that's kind of like living in spite of what's going on around you, and just, you've got to find something in yourself that, regardless of what you're outside the world is doing, even a person that you might be living with, you've got to have that peace in yourself. And what a practical way to apply, to me, what all these teachings say, you know. And then also on the worldview, thinking about how with the Russia deal and dealing with someone like Putin, you know, how unyielding most people are, and that a person like him may need to save face, and you know, think it was his idea. I don't know. See, how do those things, they can be on a personal level, just like dealing with someone in your house. They can be on that world level, dealing with a nation that's going to go to war, and how you know, a lot easier to apply personally, I think, than, you know, that way. So it's just a broad. I'm done.
Well, Jan, you know, I think, yeah, Linda, can you mute that? I keep getting, thank you. Jan, you raise the $1 million question, right? It's the application of these principles. And so, you know, again, there's the yin and the yang. How do we apply pressure without escalating the violence? I was thinking, when you were talking about foreign policy, I was thinking about after 9/11. Even countries that really didn't care for us much, right, were sympathetic because they saw. Now, I mean, I have a little bit of an understanding about the Middle East, and so, whether it's correct or incorrect, they saw that innocent people were killed, and so they were sympathetic. Even countries that weren't so sympathetic to us, they were relatively sympathetic because innocent people in our world were killed, in our country were killed. And what happens when so many people in our country loved it when President Bush at the time stood on the rubble and said, we're going to come after you, et cetera, and this kind of bravado, and then entered Iraq and then Afghanistan, and began a decades-long wars in these countries, right? All kinds of sympathy for America was lost. The question is, what would have been the appropriate response? A combination. Obviously, the role of the president is to use whatever powers she or he has to protect the country. So what would be the appropriate combination of force, and what kind of force, and also diplomacy, in order to achieve a successful outcome? And Jan, so that's on the macro scale. And then you, I was going to say how very young of you. I mean, but we all do it. We all do it, right? We try to convince people with the force of our arguments, as opposed to the model of our lives, right? Christians have had a penchant for doing that, right? We're going to convince you by the force of our doctrinal arguments. Missions were all about this for how many decades and centuries, right? Christian missions. And yet we've come to learn in our lifetime, right, that it's more about the model of your lives that can convince people of the truth of what you believe. So how you do that, how you apply these principles, that's the struggle that each one of us must face, right? Yeah. Thanks, Jan. I mean, you put your finger right on it. Muriel?
It seems like it all comes back to what you started with, was balance. And that's what I don't know how to find. It seems that would solve all the problems if we could find some balance.
Well, that's and I think that's part of the beauty of the various wisdom traditions. So many people on the screen here follow the way of Jesus. Muriel, you may follow a more of a humanist path, or another path, and others on the screen. I know Patty is a theosophy, and others of us on the screen have various wisdom teachings that help us. They not only inspire us, but they challenge us to conform our lives to a particular way. And that's why these wisdom traditions have lasted for the millennia that they have, right? Because well, and that's why they're wisdom traditions. So to do it on our own, I don't know that we're made for that, right? We need the help of those who've gone before us, and we need the help and the wisdom of the community in which we live, and those we love and those who love us. So yeah, Muriel, I mean, yeah. Remember, our lives are lived along the S curve of the yin and the yang. Yeah. Terry?
Yeah, Mike, as you were talking about kind of the international connection, well, first, on the Christian side, you corrected yourself. You said for decades, and then you said for centuries, we've been
Absolutely
trying to convince the world. I want to correct that and say for millennia. I just finished a book that's excellent. It's called The Darkening, and it starts with the 2nd century, and of course it goes into the 4th and 5th century, and the elimination of all the Greek temples and Roman temples across Christendom. I mean, it was, and the book starts, and it sounds like a description of the Taliban coming out of the desert, wearing their black robes and destroying everything in their path. But so the millennial argument of Christianity, of convincing the world. But I thought of two international examples of a third path other than applying force in a relationship of equal or in a relationship of war. And one was Switzerland, and another is Thailand. And those two countries have maintained independence and generally have maintained a posture that the warring parties kind of leave them alone in their zone. Although they're sometimes complicit with one side or the other, at least they're not entering the fray and arming the others. They may be facilitating things financially or materially, but I'm thinking of the Swiss in World War II particularly. But anyway, it is a different approach. And then I think of Bonhoeffer's approach to Christianity in the Third Reich. So, I mean, there are Christian examples too that we can look to along these lines. But,
Thanks, Terry. You know, I mean, Terry had so many good points to make. I'll just pick up on Bonhoeffer. Here's the challenge to us. I talked about King and Gandhi, and Terry brought up Bonhoeffer. They were all killed. Applying the Tao in the real world. This sounds very mushy and wonderful and life nurturing, right? Living along the way of water. Jesus was killed. But this is so radical that it provides that it's a threat to those who want to grasp power and hold it. And so this kind of life lived according to the Tao is really a challenge to the domination systems that are all around us, even psychologically within us. And so that's why finding the balance, as Muriel put it, is so difficult. Pam, please.
I kind of want to go back to Muriel's point, like where you just sort of took us to. It helps me to think of Taoism and that middle way as a practice. That it's a daily and moment by moment thing that you a practice that you attempt to put into practice, and not, oh, I've got it, or no, I don't have it, or but rather than being disheartened when you find yourself struggling, or even important, not being so overjoyed when something's going your way, that you practice just darn it, I always lose my thought. But it's a practice, I guess, that it comes and goes, and you just stick with that middle and not dwell on the moment while you stay in the moment.
Thank you for that, Pam. I think you make an excellent point, and I'll just tease out two of the things that you were saying. It's not a belief system; it's a practice. And number two, that's why they call it the way. We're on the way, right? We're on the way. It's not a destination that you achieve and now you got it. You know, like a lot of Western religious traditions. You know, I believe a certain way, so I'm in. You know, it takes the long view. The long view. It's the way. You're on the way. Yeah, thank you for that, Pam, very much.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Somebody else? Yes, Linda, what's up? Linda, is somebody wanting to ask a question from the chapel?
Yes, Patrick is. We are now having difficulty with our Wi-Fi. We think it may be because the sanctuary is now going live stream. So
Okay.
Patrick has a question. If it'll
Sure.
come
Hi,
through.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Michael.
Yes, sir.
When Stephen spoke, it made me think of a conversation I heard last night in terms of flowing like water and not being attached. Is someone knew someone who passed away and their spouse passed away days later. And I'm wondering, is that kind of like an example of the attachment piece that I hear Michael struggling with, or Stephen struggling with? And when one lives after someone passes away and still yet feels nurtured by that past relationship, is that an example?
Patrick, you just cut out on us. Let me try to answer what I think you were asking, and I got, I think, some of it or most of it. Let me see if I can respond. Detachment, living your life frictionlessly, or detaching. Detaching, again, doesn't mean that you don't feel. What it means is you feel you experience the moment so fully that you can then leave it because you got another moment to experience fully, and then another moment to experience fully, and then the next moment, and the next, and the next, and the next. And of course, because we're human beings, we're attached, right? And we grieve. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, the grief comes because of the love, right? The grief comes because of the love. So it doesn't mean to not feel, but it means to radically feel, so that you can then move to the next moment and the next and the next. And eventually, I mean, this is the miracle, really. I mean, if you think of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages, and I know there have been some tweaking of the stages of grieving and all of that, but this kind of radical acceptance, so that you can rest in the knowledge that if you're grieving a loved one, you can rest in the knowledge that this person was a part of your life and you miss them, but there's kind of an acceptance of the love that was shared. And so that you can live, you can continue to live and embrace the next moment and the next, and maybe even use the love that you shared as motivation and inspiration for the way you live your life from that moment on, even though it's hard and you miss them and all the rest. This detaching idea, this way of water, I mean, if it was easy, we'd all be doing it and everything would be fine, and so it's as Pam pointed out so nicely, it's a practice. It's part of the way, and we walk the way, and we try to embed ourselves and immerse ourselves fully in every moment. That's the way of water. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think I don't see the chapel screen, so they may have blipped off. We've got a couple more minutes, gang, and then I got to head down to church. So yes, Cammie, please.
I'm identifying with both Pam's remarks and Muriel's and wondering, this information is so cool. I've got my little lists of this and this and the yin and the yang. And what I want to ask you is, okay, I need a 3-point step process on how do I actually apply this? What do I do? How do I incorporate this, balance when I've got these polarities and the dualities, and my head's just going right now. I'm loving both approaches, and I'm sitting here. It's like, okay, so what do I do differently? How do I live my life in a different way? So even the fact that I'm asking the question says I'm way over here on the one end of it, right? So.
Well, if I gave you the 1, 2, 3, Cami, then I'd miss out on the $1 million I'm going to make when I publish this in just the next week or so.
There you go.
In all seriousness, wouldn't you wish there was a 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, and I don't want to punt on this. I'll answer you unsatisfactorily, but I will answer you. And that is this. I've been following what you've been writing on Facebook a little bit since the yin and the yang class. And the fact that you're asking the question is step 1. So you're on the way. You're on the way. And by the way, Cami will have a 1, 2, 3 that's different than Michael, and that's different than Patty, and that's different than Lee, et cetera, et cetera. What I will say is this, as part of a practice, and you do this, Cami, because you've shared this a few weeks ago when we talked about yin and yang. Most of us live our lives, to continue the image of water, live our lives either on the bank or skimming across the top of the water, not aware of the power that the water has, not aware. And so whatever, as I'm looking around the screen, whatever your practice is, it could be silence, or it could be kinesthetic, like a Tai Chi or something, or yoga, or it could be reading, reading in spiritual literature or other kinds of literature. It could be the creative arts, where you lose yourself in the painting, or I'm looking at Pam here, does quilting. It could be in service to others. Whatever it is that makes you come alive, whatever it is that you can become passionate about, I would say go deep. Go deep. And be aware. And so reflection, not just doing Confucianism, but the reflection on the balance that comes from the yin and the yang. Finding ways to express both of those in your life is at least a good way to be step 2. So it's not just merely doing, but reflection on the action, and then how the reflection changes the action for the next time, and then a constant cycle of action, reflection, action, reflection. That's a good way of finding the balance. But asking the question first, Cami. So your charge to all of us is to be more aware and more reflective of the struggle for balance. And for that, I'm grateful to you.